Lisa, the classroom is yours.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see everybody. So as some of you know, Shavuot is coming up. It's going to be happening tomorrow for us. And so we had a all-night study session that the teachers put on. And I wanted to kind of delve deeper into what I discussed in that class, which was the story of Ruth. Now, I find the portrayal of women in the Tanakh really fascinating. Maybe it's because, I grew up not that religious. So, when I studied the Tanakh, in depth and not just the stories taught at Hebrew school, I was, already in college. And so, the way women were portrayed and what their roles were in Judaism really, brought to the forefront of what I wanted, from my own life, from my Judaism, from, my role in the future. And so when we look at the story of women in the Tanakh, it's not so great. Women in the Tanakh are often, they are shown as being vindictive, they are jealous, they deal with, things like rape and adultery and, infertility. And so we don't, none of these women are clear, women that we might idolize. And, my name in Hebrew is Leah. And so one of the first things I did when I started becoming more religious was look up my name, right? Who is this woman, Leah? I think names are really important. They give someone a personality, a way to go. And I was really disappointed by reading the story of Leah because, here's a story of a woman and her sister, and they quarrel over the same man, and they get so jealous of each other that they name their kids, "My husband loves me more." Right? All the kids' names are, "I'm cooler and you're not," which if we, delve down in, that's not exactly the kind of person I want to be named after. But we do know that part of the Tanakh, that we say that every word is there for a reason. And therefore, there can be a lot read between the lines, right? There's a lot of analysis that goes on. So maybe what we have to think about, those of you who were in my last class about King David, we talked about how, there's this ideal hero, but they also have flaws because in Judaism, no one is perfect. So maybe we can say the same thing about the women in the Tanakh, right? None of them are perfect. They're human. And so they can have these flaws. They can be jealous and they can also be great, strong women. I think one of the bigger things I struggle with is that we don't often see in the Tanakh a woman who is an active, changer of society. Right? We have these, the matriarchs, these great women who sit at these positions of change, and their husbands are changing the way we interact with each other and changing the way we interact with God. And for the most part, the women are kind of side notes in it. So how can we deal with that? And so the reason why I like the book of Ruth, first of all, it's one of the few, two books really that we have where the woman is the main character. This is very clearly the focus. And she isn't exactly a game changer, which I'll talk about in a minute, but simply by the fact that she has her own book, her own story, is clearly the main character of the story, tells us already that she has a different status than many other women in the Tanakh. And so I wanted to start off by, reading a little bit about Ruth, just to, people haven't read the book of Ruth, to kind of catch up a little bit. The story of Ruth starts out that we have this woman, Naomi, who is married in Bethlehem, and there is a famine, and so she leaves with her husband and her 2 sons, and they travel into the land of Moab. And there she settles, and her sons marry Moab women, Ruth and Orpah. Right, the fun side information to know is that that's where Oprah comes from, right? Oprah, her mother wanted to be Orpah and spelled it wrong in the birth certificate, so we get Oprah instead. But in the Tanakh, it's Orpah. And they marry these women, and then Naomi's husband Okay, hold on. Now I'm back?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was saying that we have these women who are now, widowed and left all alone. And we know that in the ancient world, being a widowed woman was not exactly a death sentence, but there was no way to have your own money, to have your own livelihood, to have your own house, to survive in society. And basically, the only way to survive was to get remarried. And so Naomi turns to her daughter-in-laws and says, you guys are still young, you're beautiful, go back to your people, get remarried, and settle down. And Orpah does, but Ruth decides not to. And I'm going to share a text here. So this is a bit from the book of Ruth. So this is the actual text. But Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you, for wherever you go, I will go, wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her. So we have this bit in which Ruth says, I want to go with you. You've been my mother-in-law. I've learned your customs. I know your family. I want to be with you. And it seems really sudden because we don't know anything about Ruth, about her life with Naomi or with her husband's. It sounds like somebody else has a mic on. Okay, thank you. So we don't know anything about her past. So how all of a sudden is she deciding to convert, right? This is a really big step. Your God is my God. And we know in Judaism that we don't take conversion lightly, right? You can go to heaven and not be a Jew. That's fine. You don't have to be Jewish, to get any sort of extra special attention. In fact, it's harder, right? You have to take on more commandments. So how do we see the back? And this is where we read between the lines a little bit. There is a section in the Talmud, and this is what it says. The Gemara reconstructs the original dialogue in which Naomi attempted to dissuade Ruth from converting. Naomi said to her, on Shabbat, it's prohibited for us to go beyond the Sabbath limit, right? So Ruth's telling her, I know you want to convert, but that's hard. On Shabbat, you can't do whatever you want. There's limits. And Ruth responds, where you go, I shall go, and no further. Naomi said to her, it's forbidden for us to be alone together with a man with whom it's forbidden to engage in relations, right? So it's difficult. You can't just hang out with anyone you want to hang out with. And Ruth responded, where you lodge, I shall lodge. And the same man, Naomi said to her, we are commanded to do 613 mitzvot, right? You can survive off of the Noahide laws. You have, basic don't kill people and you're fine if you're not a Jew. But if you want to be Jewish, there's all these rules about the way we eat and the way we live and what we do that, this is a lot to take on. But Ruth responds, your people are my people. Naomi says to her, idolatrous worship is forbidden to us, right? You have to give up your past. And this is important too, because, we may say, well, it's just giving up idols. But anyone who's ever converted or even become more religious in later ages knows that it's so much more than that, right? When you take on a new religion, it's not just the religion, it's the culture, right? It's how much do you have to think about what you do or don't do, right? But Ruth responds, your God is my God. Naomi says to her, 4 types of capital punishment were handed over the court, and with to punish those who transgress the mitzvot, right? So if you don't do these things, then you'll die. You don't even have to do them now. And Ruth says, where you die, I shall die. And Naomi said there 2 burial grounds were handed over to the court, one for those executed for more severe crimes, another for those executed for less severe crimes. And Ruth responded, there I shall be buried. Immediately following this dialogue, the verse states, and when she saw that she was steadfastly minded, she left off speaking with her. So this is a little bit of a more in-depth look at what this conversation was. When we say, your God is my God, the Talmud, these rabbinical sources say that it's not as simple as that there's a conversation here. We're just getting, the brief bit of it. We're just getting a little snapshot of what happened. And the most important thing is this bit at the end. So Naomi tries to tell her not to do it, right? It's really hard. You don't need to become Jewish. You're fine the way you are. But everything she says, Ruth has an answer. Ruth says, no, this is what I want. This is what I believe. And the fact that she restates it and never falters, then Naomi says, okay, I understand you very clearly. This is what you want. And once you've made the decision, you are Jewish, right? Once you've converted, there can be no more questions about what you are. And this is a really big thing in Judaism, right? We talk about people who have converted, that we must consider converts as being fully Jewish, right? They've made this choice, they've taken this decision, and we can no longer say, oh, you're a convert, so you're different than us, right? That's not the case. They are as Jewish as anybody else. So Ruth takes on this huge step. And while it may seem very sudden, in truth, we see that there is a lot of thought behind the process. So Ruth follows Naomi, and she follows her back to Bethlehem. And they arrive back in Bethlehem, where Naomi's now been missing for decades. And their family goes out to welcome her. And they welcome her with a little bit of, I don't know exactly, a snide comment maybe. But they say, is this really Naomi? And Rashi explains, why do we say, Hazot Naomi, right? Is this, right? Is an extra, bit here. Every letter matters. So why do we care? Because the high, this emphasis is interrogative, right? Is this the Naomi who, when she left, was wealthy and traveled in covered wagons and had mules, right? And now that she's been abroad and her sons and her husband have died, and she's struggled through all these things, that her oxen have died, she's basically lost everything now as a widow. Have you seen what has befallen her because she went abroad? So again, this kind of like threat almost of what happens when Jews go abroad, when they leave the Holy Land and turn away from their people. Right? This is what they come back as. She is in a very dark place. So one of the things I talked about in my class on Sunday was this issue of, now that they're back, what do they do? First, we have Naomi, who is older. She's been out of Israel for decades now, and Ruth, who is a convert but isn't part of the community, and is looked at as a stranger, and they're widows. They have no way to make any sort of living. And so the one thing they can do is they can look for charity, right? And in the ancient world, today we might think of charity as being money, right? You go, you look for help with money. In the ancient world, money wasn't important. What was important was food, right? You needed food to survive. And so the Jewish tzedakah system, the charity system, is built around food, right? There's all sorts of laws that govern how and when you can plant and how and when you can sow. And when you do reap the food, you can't take everything. So for instance, when you have grapes, you're growing grapes in a vineyard, and you go to pick the grapes, most of the grapes are ready. There's always like 5 to 10% that aren't quite ready at the beginning of the season. You're not supposed to pick those. Those are left for those who can't survive by themselves, right? Widows, orphans, the Levites, the priests. So the same thing with fields, right? If you have people who are picking corn or wheat, and they have a bundle of stuff in their skirts, they've picked it up and things fall out, they're not allowed to pick that up. That is meant for those who can't survive. So these things are meant for charity. And so Ruth and Naomi, who are stuck in this position, must go out and find a way to get their own food through this level of charity. And so Ruth does, right? Naomi sits back. She has a young daughter-in-law now to work for her. But it has to be a little embarrassing, right? We talk in Judaism about levels of tzedakah, levels of charity. It can be really difficult when you grow up in a certain type of lifestyle. They say that Ruth was, if not a royal, a high-ranking Moabite woman. And for her to go from this high level to have to go and forage for food, right? To stand behind the workers and hope they drop stuff, it's embarrassing, it's difficult. But Ruth never seems to falter, right? The first thing she does, she says, I have to do this. This is how I'm going to survive. And it's not shameful, right? This is where I am in life. This is what it's meant for. I'm not taking advantage of it. Therefore, I'm going to go and I'm going to do what I have to do to help survive. And so we are in the second book of Ruth now, and she went off and she came and she gleaned in a field behind the reapers. And as luck would have it, it was the piece of land that belonged to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. So she happens, or fate leads her to this piece of land, which is a relative of her husband. And this is important because, today it's important, but even in the ancient world is more important, this idea of, family lines. And the fact that she would be on this land which is connected to her dead husband was an important thing. It counts as a line of family, a certain level of protection. And Boaz comes back and he looks out into the field and he sees Ruth there. And the first thing he asks is, to whom does this maiden belong? Who is this beautiful woman who is standing there? And of course, there's some debate about why he notices her, right? Is it because she's very pretty? Maybe. Is it because she dressed differently? Because she acted differently? Well, the rabbis, Rashi especially, has put a lot of focus on her sniut, on her modest dress. So he says, was the practice of Boaz to inquire about women? Rather, because he saw her modest and wise behavior, he was curious about her. He observed that 2 ears she would glean, but 3 she would not glean. So why is that important? Because the Mishnah tells us that the Torah awards the fallen ears of grain and forgotten sheaves to the poor. Thus, her exemplary behavior and knowledge of the law caught the attention of Boaz, and he therefore inquired about her. Right, so there is this, limit on how much she would pick up. She'd only pick up as much as she needed, and not more. Right, which is what the Torah tells us. And even more than that, she would get them while standing. The ones that were up and the ones that were on the floor while sitting, so that she wouldn't be bending over and modestly showing herself off. So she stands out to Boaz not only because she's beautiful, but because she is modest, because she is a hard worker, and because she's only taking what she needs. So Boaz knows her right away, and Boaz approaches her. And he says, listen to me, daughter. Don't go glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I've ordered the men not to molest you. And when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water the men have drawn. She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner? And Boaz said in reply, I've been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you have not known before. So there's a lot going on here. So he goes to talk to her. And he says, stay here, your family, I will help take care of you. I'll make sure that no one molests you, which tells us that was apparently a very common thing in the ancient world, right? These widows who would be stuck out in the field were often easy game for those who want to take advantage of them. But he promises that won't happen. And she's so thankful, right, that she throws herself on the ground and she wants to show her gratitude. She says, why are you doing this, right? Why are you being so nice to me, to a stranger in a strange land? And he says, I've heard of the things you've done, right? I've heard of the challenges you've overcome. I understand, people say when you go to a new country or a new religion, new culture, okay, so fine, good for you. But Boaz tells her, I understand how difficult that was, how many challenges you have to overcome, right? It's not so easy. Anyone who's, moved to a new country, if you're an American, moved to Israel, for instance, you were stood in the grocery store trying to figure out what you're trying to buy with the food names, you know how difficult even the most simple things can be in a new culture, in a new life. And so Boaz says, I want to acknowledge that you need that kind of help, right? This is an important thing. And so she stays there and she gets the food, and then she goes to her mother-in-law and she says, I had a really good day today. I brought back all this food for us. And it happens that I was in this man's land who is a relative. His name is Boaz. And Naomi is super happy because Boaz is wealthy. He's single. He's also a family member. This could be a really good way to get both Ruth and Naomi, out of the poorhouse, right? Which is an important thing. And so Naomi tells Ruth, she says, daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. right? Even though it's not really her job, she's a mother-in-law, it's not her mother. Because Ruth has converted and followed her, she feels this responsibility, right? I have to help you find a space. Now there's our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and cover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. She replied, I will do everything you tell me. So Naomi basically tells her daughter, go to this man in the middle of the night, wait till he's, drunk, wait till he's had a good belly of food, wait till he's asleep, and then lie at his feet and wait till he tells you what to do, right? I don't know about any of you, if my mother-in-law ever told me to do that, I can't imagine my first answer would be, yes, sounds like a good idea. But Ruth she understands the situation. She has nothing going for her at the moment. She, is a foreigner. She's a Moabite. She's a convert. People don't trust her, and she's a single woman, right? She has no sort of control over her own life. And from what she's, met and interacted with Boaz, he seems like a pretty good guy. He's already promised that she would be safe with him, that he would not, attack her, that no one around him would attack. So that seems like a pretty good thing. And so she goes to him in the middle of the night and she lies down at his feet and she, basically says, do with me as you wish. And Boaz's response is rather surprising for the men of the time. He says, be blessed of the Lord, daughter, your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask. For all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. But while it is true I'm a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, then in the morning, if you act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. But if he's not one to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. So she says, I'll do whatever you want to Boaz in the middle of the night after he's, drunk and full. And his response is, I really want to. That's great, but it would be a disservice to you, right? There is someone out there who could be better for you, right? When we talk about the term redeemer, there is this issue of family line because she comes, she's married into someone from this land. He comes with a name. And so anyone who would marry her would have to inherit and deal with that extra family line. And so the closer we stick within the family, the better things are, right? Historically, when women would be widowed, the first person they would look for to remarriage would be a brother-in-law, right? What better way than to keep it in the family to ensure, a family line and this connection. And so Boaz says there's someone better than I am, right? Which I think is a pretty, respectable answer in the situation. Let's wait till morning and let's wait till we're all clear-headed. If he will take you and that's a better thing for you, then great. If not, then I would love to marry you. And, an additional note, he also realizes how terrible for her it would be if she was found, sneaking out, in the middle of the night during the early morning, kind of the walk of shame kind of situation, right? That could be really damaging to her. And so he makes sure that she leaves in kind of the dusk hours. He tells her how to dress so that she won't be, caught and shamed even though nothing happened. And so they go in front of the court, and Boaz asks this closer redeemer who doesn't have a name, would you like her? And he says no. And so Boaz and Ruth get married, agree to get married. That's where we end here. So Boaz marries Ruth, and she became his wife, and he cohabitated with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born to your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother, and the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, a son is born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. This is the line of Peretz. Peretz begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminad. Aminad begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. Now, honestly, this bit of the text always bothered me the most, which maybe is silly, but as someone who has a mother-in-law, I can't ever imagine getting remarried and having a child, and that child being named by the community, right? The women of the community name the child, and then they declare this child the son of Naomi. Right now, how is Naomi related to this child? Well, she's not genetically. Right? It's her daughter-in-law has married somebody else and now has a kid. And so, this taking over of the child by Naomi, I've always struggled with that. But I think it's really kind of an understanding thing of Ruth to do, in the sense that she understands she's a convert. She understands that her child needs to be accepted into the community, and being named by the community and being raised as a child of Naomi, who was from the community, gives her son, a clear, connected path in life, and doesn't kind of leave him with, I don't really want to say the shame, but the issue of having a Moabite mother in the Jewish community, right? Which was seen as kind of a mark of shame. So, with all of this, we have this woman who is not exactly control of her own story. She's very passive in most things. And, the very end, basically she disappears, right? No one really cares about her. And then they care about this son that is born, this redeemer that is born. So why do we hold Ruth up as such an important figure? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with this last bit, because what that chain of lineage did at the end was it tells us that Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David, right, who I talked about last time. And King David is the great changer of Judaism, bringing together a united nation, Jerusalem, right? He's this great, the Psalms, and then he's, he speaks the word of God. And he, what we say in Judaism is that the line of David will be the line of Mashiach, right? The line of the Redeemer. When we all, reach the end of our times and the world becomes a perfect place, that, this will come through the line of David. So why is it important to know that David comes from the line of Ruth? And again, we said, who is Ruth, right? Ruth has at least 3 big strikes against her. Well, number one, she's a convert, right? Why should the line of the Redeemer come from someone who is a convert? And I think this is a really important thing. I do this thing called Partners in Torah. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's an organization in which you sign up and they connect ultra-religious people with non-religious people. And so I started studying with this woman 15 years ago on Purim, and we study once a week for 15 years about different stuff about Judaism. And she comes from an ultra-Orthodox community in Connecticut, and I come from a non-Jewish community in Northern California. So we come from 2 very different backgrounds. And, I've always been really jealous of the fact that when we study things come so natural to her, right? She grew up in this. And we talk about spirituality or keeping kosher.
Lisa, we lost sound again. Hold on.
Now we're back? Yes? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So I was saying that, for her, everything comes second nature. And I always really jealous of that fact, because for me, every day living a Jewish life is a challenge, right? I have to think everything I do. When I, think about what I eat, about keeping kosher, about holidays. I always laugh, here in Israel, every Rosh Chodesh, every first of the month, the Hebrew calendar, they have the kids wear white shirts, and it's a big thing. And I never remember when Rosh Chodesh is. It's not something that's in my frame of mind, not something that I think about. And so, everything is an extra step, right? And one time we were talking a couple years ago, and she out of the blue said, Lisa, I'm really jealous of you. I said, you're jealous of me? You get Judaism. I have to think about it every step of the way. It's exhausting. It's tiring, right? Why should I even bother? And she said, but that's exactly it. She said, Lisa, you've eaten a bacon cheeseburger and you've chosen to give it up, right? Whereas my partner in Torah, she's never once in her life eaten a bacon cheeseburger. So she doesn't even know what it is, right? And so converts, yes, it's a harder life, but on the other hand, they have chosen this, right? And because they have to fight each and every day for what it means to be Jewish, in a sense, that's almost a truer Judaism, right? That we need this line for the Redeemer, that we need to come out of someone who made this choice, who didn't simply grow up with it and accept it because, that's the way life is and we do what our grandparents do and all of that. So there's this idea that, a convert is an important step. So that's one, right? Two, we said she doesn't exactly seem in control of her life. Right? How can this woman who is a line of Mashiach, this great story, be someone who just let life happen to her, right? She doesn't say much in the story, right? Besides her little bit at the beginning, she's very quiet in the story. And I think we learn from this that being quiet doesn't make you a friar. You don't have to be a loud person to get a point across, right? We have the Trumps and the Churchills and the FDRs of the world, right? These people who are loud and in your face and making change. But that you can make change without being that type of person. I always think in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, right? If anyone's ever seen the movie where, it says, the man may be the head, but the wife is the neck, right? You can be in the back and you can be moving history without having to be loud about it. I told this story last time also, but my dad is always who I think about as someone who is, the strong, silent type who would never get up and, give a speech, but yet, drives the family and is always there and supporting us more than anyone else I know. And so we can be this kind of, quiet background, without having to be loud. And the truth is, even though she may not seem in control, I think we see throughout the text that she is, even though she's not loud about it, right? She converts of her own accord, right? She says, this is what I want to do. And I strongly feel that if she didn't want to, go to Boaz's feet, if she didn't feel it was the right step, that she wouldn't have done it. But she does because, she understands that this is, what is right for her. And that, sometimes we have these characters like Boaz, right, who does seem to be this kind of outgoing doer. And Ruth, in contrast, is this kind of introverted, loyalty. And so, these people together, that's what really makes a match, right? Sometimes in a relationship, you need one person who is outgoing and loud and someone else who, kind of helps in the background. It can be really difficult. We always laugh because my husband and I are both first children. And you don't often see a relationship with two first children because there's a personality thing there of, first children and how they relate. And so, this balance of Boaz and Ruth is a really important aspect. So one, said she's a convert. Two, she's not exactly a doer, although she is. And three, she's poor, right? The whole book is based around charity, right? Is based around the fact that she has to go and glean in the fields, and she has to, she's this widow in this society. And, why should when we think of the line of Mashiach, we should be thinking of King David, right? Of the wealthy and, the great and, these high-ranking statuses. So why do we look back to Ruth, right? To someone who is poor and who is struggling. And I think this is an also really important thing, right? She does what is necessary. She does it modestly. She does it without complaint. We see from the Talmud that she only takes what she needs and not anything else. And she never, cries about her situation in a way that is, whining about it, basically. And again, that this line of Mashiach doesn't have to come from the wealthy, right? It can come from people who change their status in life. They can come from someone who's poor, but is still a hardworking, loyal, modest, religious person. Wealth doesn't mean greatness, And I think that's a really important thing we learn. And so when we look about, what this means for Mashiach, for the future, right, for this line of David, we may say, how terrible is this, right? We see all around David, this line of David, terrible things, right? We talked about the rape of his daughter last time, and the fact that his great-grandmother is this kind of, questionable character in her background. The fact that she, joins Boaz in the middle of the night, which is not exactly, chaste. But none of this disqualifies, Ruth from being, the creator, the line of David. And so these are all part of God's plan, right? The fact that people can change and that everyone will be brought back. If you simply put your mind to it and are a good person and focus and study and do the right things, that you can change your own life and you can be part of this, future that is great. And it doesn't matter what your past is, right? You can choose your own path and your own future. And so, this is why I really like the book of Ruth, because, it's a feminine character that we don't often see great things from in the Tanakh, but also because of how much it teaches us about, what we should do on a day-to-day basis, the kind of people we should be. I mentioned last time also, I've been listening to this podcast on Mr. Rogers called Finding Fred, if anyone's interested. And it talks about Mr. Rogers and his outlook on life. And it was telling the story about how he went to Russia to meet a kid, because a kid wrote him that he was lonely in Russia back in the 70s. And he showed up in Russia. And the kid said, the first thing Mr. Rogers did was knock on the door, and he got down on my eye level, and he was with me. He felt, like everything he said, it wasn't an act. He was with me in that moment. He was listening to everything I said. And I think Ruth is that same kind of way, right? How can we interact with people? How can we, be in the moment? That's a really difficult thing for people, right? To put things down, to put down, the phone and the TV and all the stuff going on around us, the multiple Zoom meetings. And how can we really be with people? And that's what Ruth is, right? This connection, this kind of purity almost. And so that's what I really find inspiring about her. Does anyone have any questions or any opinions on Ruth? Anyone think I'm totally wrong on the book of Ruth? Yeah, go ahead, Solomon. Can you unmute yourself? Hold on, maybe I can unmute you. Hold on. Let's see if I can unmute you. Okay, there you go.
Okay, I think that we have to remember, listening to all of this and looking at this, Hashem rules the world. You have to see the hand of Hashem in this whole thing. Remember, at that time it was all patrilineal descent. Okay, didn't matter who the woman was who the father was. The same thing with David, the same thing with Solomon, the same thing with our forebears. Rebecca wasn't Jewish. Rachel wasn't Jewish. Leah wasn't Jewish either. But this is the way. Ruth was somebody who lived in a household for 10 years. And she was affected. She's a very sensitive individual that was affected by the lifestyle of Naomi in the house, in the Jewish house. Oprah wasn't. Oprah was not affected that way. She was a different kind of an individual. So at the end, Ruth felt a kinship to Naomi. She felt this was like a mother to her. And remember, Naomi lost her husband and her children. At that point, the woman had really nobody except this young girl. And she felt, this is a daughter, this is another child I never had. And so the whole story evolves around, actually, Hashem laid it all out. She was the vessel for David. But Boaz is actually also responsible in a sense. But it's a very, very interesting concept, the whole thing. I mean, this thing is you can talk about this here for days. Really.
That's always like analyzing text, because there's so much there.
I tell you, I love to listen to you talk and teach. And that's why I look forward to it. Really do.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Did anyone else have a thought on Ruth or the role of women in the Tanakh? Or on the chat? Okay. Look, the next couple days, one of the things we do over Shavuot is study and learn. If you've never picked up the book of Ruth, I do recommend that you pick it up. It's very short. And I've actually been studying it. My daughter is supposed to be about mitzvah next year. You know, we've talked about culture clashes today and, you know, taking on a new community. I grew up in a conservative, you know, West Coast family. And I had a bat mitzvah and read from the Torah. And my husband is a Moroccan. He grew up in an Orthodox family. And so this idea of a bat mitzvah has been a big challenge, but we agreed that reading the book of Ruth would be acceptable to his family because it's not actually the Torah, and so it's acceptable. So we've kind of glommed onto the book of Ruth as a acceptable reading for her to do for her bat mitzvah. So another, you know, cultural aspect of it. So I hope you all get some time to learn over the next couple days. Oh, wait, we have another comment here. Oh, sorry, I forgot that you guys are all, I have to unmute you guys. Says, I think Ruth does have agency as she chooses to go with Naomi as opposed to Orpah. Also, I love this book about feminine solidarity. Would you like me to unmute you? I can. I just have to find you here. That's okay. You're unmuted now if you'd like to say something. If not, then Danny, would you like to add something? Oh, no. Okay, never mind. So yeah, so there is this kind of agency, even though it might not seem as agency. All right. Okay, well, thank you all for tuning in today. Stay tuned till next week. I think we're going to be coming back with something next week. And I hope you all join in. See, okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Sameach.
Sameach.